Hello, everyone. It's a few minutes after the schedule. Looks like don't know if anyone tuned into this. I said I'd go live at 11:30 GMT. Maybe I didn't give enough time. Maybe it's something I need to do over like a day or something like that. Anyway, if you are watching, please say hello. Ask me a question. Feel free to say anything. I'm pretty open. If you want to ask me a question about my channel, about myself, um, I'll just reiterate some of the things I said in the previous video attempt. I know that I don't always reply to comments, so if you've left a comment and I don't get back to you, apologies for that. But perhaps if there's some feedback to this, I might use this as a way to interact with my subscribers. Um, I'll do this for about 5 minutes, see what sort of response it gets, and if this isn't particularly successful, then I will try maybe giving more of an advance notice or something like that. Not really doing anything particular right now, just watching the extras of a film, The Greatest Showman, actually. I sometimes do that when I'm sort of multitasking or just in the background, watch the making of or something like that on a feature film. Um, what else can I say? Yeah, if you're new to my channel, if you've just subscribed, thank you for that. And I talk about a whole range of things. I talk about topical issues. I don't shy away from controversy, but I try to make things relevant. Um, and I certainly don't make videos for the sake of provoking, but I also try to raise issues that I feel are important. So I talk about social issues, geopolitical issues, occasionally cultural things. I'll do film reviews and that sort of thing. I can see two people are watching, so feel free to say hello if you're there. Feel free to ask me a question. Um, that's it, really. I'm going to let this run for about 5 minutes, and don't get any response, then I'm not sure if I'll do it again because it's kind of pointless. Um, like I said, I'm not really used to this, so it's the first time I've done it properly. But if you want to ask any questions about anything, maybe you've seen a video and you want to follow up on that video or something, now's your chance. Ask anything. I'm here. I'll answer if any questions come through. I'll answer as best I can. So go ahead. See, a third person's just tuned in. Come on, guys and girls, I'm waiting. Give me some feedback. um, I'll answer anything. Um, yeah, like I say, I haven't really done this before, so I'm not entirely sure how it works. As I understand it, people watch and interact. I sometimes watch political ones, like political live feeds of politicians in the UK and the US. It could be interesting. I like the concept, but I'll only do this again if it elicits a response. If it doesn't elicit a response, I don't really see the point because I think it's different from regular videos where I talk about a particular subject and people watch it and give feedback. I'm not sure if these are uploaded in the same way. Okay, we've got a response. Jagger or Jagger is by. Hi, you look like Cillian Murphy. Thanks for that. I like Cillian Murphy as an actor. He's if you don't know, he's a prominent Irish actor. Well, I'm from Northern Ireland. I think he's got darker hair though. I'll take that as a compliment. So thank you. He's one of the best actors around right now. Enjoyed his role in Red Eye. So Jagger is by. Are you a fan of Cillian Murphy? Guess you are. Do you think there will be a second wave in the UK? Okay, this is what I like to see. Some questions rolling in. I assume you mean coronavirus wave. I'm not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I think that it's possible. And there's two things I'm thinking of with that. Firstly, history. As I understand, there was a second wave of the Spanish influenza or the Great 1918 influenza, and that was very deadly. Also, every year in the UK, thousands of people die from seasonal flu around winter time. So I think there is a risk that could coincide. So in this country, I think it's possible that there will be a second wave. I think some of our neighbours elsewhere in Europe have already experienced that. I believe it's already happening in Spain and Italy. So unfortunately, I think there might be a second wave, which is why people really can't be complacent. For me, much of it comes down to common sense. Wash your hands, wear the face masks. It's common sense. But yeah, I do think that there could be a second wave. Um, if you're watching this, anyone, feel free to let me know where you're watching from. If you're here in the UK or in the United States, where you're watching from, and keep the questions coming in. Got 6 viewers now, so ask me anything, absolutely anything. Like I say, these videos I'm not really planning out a set subject because the nature of live stream is that I'm just kind of talking. Um, this is totally sort of spontaneous, but I'm drinking out of a cup. Titanic sinks. It's kind of like a newspaper headline. Um, long had an interest in the ship. So mug I got a few years ago. Um, come on, people, don't be shy. Ask anything. I know sometimes people leave comments and I don't always get back to them. So um, the wisdom within. Okay, well, they're starting to roll in now. The wisdom within, awesome. Actually, it was the wisdom within who came up with this idea. Okay, they're starting to flow in now. Right, that's good. I'll try and get to these questions one at a time. There's quite a few flowing in now. Okay, the wisdom within. I'm going to ask something, Nathan, on the topic of anxiety. Um, but I'll come back to that. Jaeger is by Did I Cry at the End of Titanic? I don't mind admitting, yes, I did. I'm pretty sentimental when it comes to films. Titanic is my favorite film, and yes, I shed a tear, but maybe not for the same reason that other people did. Not so much Jack and Rose, more just the general story of the Titanic. It was a very powerful film. Yeah, I shed a tear. Right, there's quite a few questions here, so try and respond to them as I can. So bear with me. Jonathan Scottish, do you think the government will get a deal? I don't think they will. I assume that's referring to Brexit. To be quite honest, I try to put Brexit at the back of my mind these days. I just find it so polarizing and so the way I feel about Brexit, and I'll just say this briefly. Earlier this year, the situation was we left. That's it, and I sort of thought, well, okay, I voted Remain, but we're out now. That's it. I know there's a transition period, as I understand, goes up to the end of this year. But I will say this: I think it was always going to be complex, um, because we're one nation. We obviously will want the government to get the best for our side, but naturally the EU is going to want the best for them as well. So honestly, I don't know. I don't know. But I do hope that come next year, all of this will have been settled. I do think it's welcome news that we got a trade with Japan. I think that's very welcome news. Right, address a few more questions here. The wisdom within. I suffer from a specific form of anxiety, sensorometer OCD, of being constantly aware of myself. It is really brutal and freaking me out. I have the fear of losing my job and being constantly freeze to this awareness. What's been your experience with anxiety? Are you personally having that anxiety symptom of being so overconscious? Well, I must be honest, I'm not familiar with what you've mentioned, sensor, sensory motor OCD, but I have had my share of anxiety, periods of financial ups and downs. I have had anxiety. I haven't always had stable work, so that's been a big cause of anxiety, particularly when you get to your mid 30s, as I am. every decision we make matters. So there is a lot of pressure. Um, but what you're talking about, are you personally having this anxiety symptom of being overconscious? I'm not sure if not quite sure I follow what you mean by that. Overconscious about over aware, or I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. But if it's as I take it, aware of okay, aware of blinking, breathing, thinking. No, that doesn't cause me anxiety. I must admit, it's more externalized things. For example, financial problems. Yeah, it sounds almost like what you're talking about, and I'm no expert. It sounds almost like body dysphoria. I don't know. Are you taking medication for that? Um, I mean, I'm no expert on these things. All I can say is my own experience of anxiety is one of more external things. Thankfully, it hasn't been profound. I have a good friend who suffered serious anxiety to the point where he used to wear a cap and he couldn't leave his house. Um, I've been having this specific form for over 10 years. That sounds like a bit of a drag. Um, so I would actually ask the question, the wisdom within, and this is on the public forum, so I'm sure you wouldn't mind me raising this. Do you feel that you have self-confidence? Because it sounds to me like the sort of anxiety you're having is about almost like a self-perception thing. So what's the situation there? Do you have self-confidence? And while I'll just can think about that to see if there's other questions I've missed. Um, Thank you, by the way, for all those who've sent questions. Um, got 6 viewers at the moment. If you've just joined in, feel free to ask anything. I'll try to get back to people. This is an interesting one. Jaeger is by, or Jaeger. How do you pronounce that? It looks like the Germanic Jaeger. Jaeger is by. Do you believe in any conspiracy theories? That's an interesting one. Um, Broadly speaking, not exactly. However, I'm open-minded. I think that where there is power, there is definitely avenues for corruption. But I've just been watching 9/11 videos. Obviously, we've just passed the 19th anniversary. I always get quite emotional in this event. I don't know anyone who died, but it does move me deeply. And I guess I'm a bit more mainstream. Um, I did come across someone recently who believed that COVID was made up, and I must admit that bothered me. I think it's rather insulting to the victims. But do I believe in any conspiracy theories? Put it this way, I wouldn't outright dismiss them, but do I believe them? Not exactly, because what I find with conspiracy theories is that people, even if they're given the evidence and the facts, they'll want to find some angle where an alternative is just far more interesting. I mean, the famous one, of course, the Kennedy assassination. The idea that one lone guy could have done it is just too inconsequential for such a big event. The same with other ones, the sinking of the Titanic, the September 11th attacks, the death of Princess Diana. I think these are all big news stories, so they're going to get. There's always going to be that side where people will want to think that there is something deeper, and there may well be. So I don't outright dismiss conspiracy theories. Certainly, some more evidence has emerged over time, but at the same time, I think we need to be a little bit careful not to just look for them because we want to. Um, because I think there is a danger you could go down a sort of dark rabbit hole, and that can even get into, well, for example, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories ultimately contributed to the Holocaust. So, um, do I believe in conspiracy theories? Depends on the conspiracy theory, and it depends on to what extent it's being argued. That's probably the best answer I could give. Um, the wisdom within, just to get back to your question. No, don't worry, mate. You're not cluttering my comment section. Um, I appreciate all the feedback, so don't worry about that. Nathan, you mentioned you're living with your parents being a while ago. Well, I should clarify that was a few years ago. I'm by myself now. No, I'm not living with them now. I am in my 30s, like yourself. Um, I would say this, though. I think it's less of a stigma than it maybe used to be in this country. I think particularly now as we're facing another major recession, at the time of the Great Recession, a lot of millennials started living with their parents longer than usual. This may be a cultural thing. In Southern Europe, countries like Italy, I understand it's more normal. In Northern Europe, countries like Germany and Britain, there's a little bit of a stigma that you're almost seen in a negative light if you do. I never judge others depending on the family circumstances. I think it's entirely people have different life circumstances. For myself, I'm not living with my parents now. I've been living by myself for 4 years, but they they live in Scotland, about 3 hours from where I live. Okay, you mentioned you live in South Africa. You used to live in Australia. That's interesting. So you've had experience of moving around. Um, I say that's interesting because you know a lot of people who have that introversion issue maybe with confidence have lived in the same place their whole life. Um, what I do work wise, well, I'm semi unemployed right now, but I occasionally teach online. My background's in English teaching. I have three students at the moment. An older lady who they're all Chinese. She's an older lady in her late 40s. I teach a little boy. And I teach a high school student, and it's just oral English, conversational English. That's pretty much my work, but it isn't. It's very, very part time. So I'm also volunteering in a charity shop. If you're in the UK, anyone, Bernardo's, you'll be familiar with it. It's a children's charity shop, but that's just like helping to tidy up, and it's nothing very exciting. Just trying to get some till experience. Um, so work isn't ideal right now, but that's that. Um, Okay, so any more questions, people? Feel free to. Do you have a pet bird or rabbit? That's an interesting one. No, I don't have any pets. But if I was to have a pet, a bird could be interesting. Yeah. I imagine they're a lot of work, though. The only thing with a bird, I remember when I was in China, the sort of policeman who looked after the gate, like security guy, I guess he was a semi-police officer. He had this little bird in a cage, and it was very cramped. I didn't like it. It just seemed a bit cruel, particularly with birds. I mean, birds are meant to fly. Cruel to me. Um, Nathan, did I study formally? I did go to university, yes. The University of Wolverhampton. It's a large but not very well known university in the UK near Birmingham, in the city of Wolverhampton. I went there for 2 years, but I didn't graduate. Right now, I'm actually taking a course in freelance journalism, so technically, I'm studying right now. It's an independent course, that is to say. It's pretty flexible. It's long distance learning. I've got 2 years to submit all the assignments, but it's very useful, very good information about how to liaise with editors and so on. And that would go full circle because at university I studied journalism, so I feel like this is going full circle. What do you guys do? So the wisdom within you mentioned studied engineering. So are you an engineer? Are you qualified, or what's the situation there? Has your mental health issues impacted that? You mentioned before the your work and support work. Okay. Would you say your anxiety affects your job? And yeah, Gurez, bye. Thanks for answering the question on conspiracy theories. I'm an intergalactic, okay, shape-shifting, multicolored lizard from Mars to space watching you right now and like your videos. I'm not talking to David Icke, am I? I'm rather enjoying this format, by the way. The wisdom within this was a very good idea. So thank you for your suggestion. I think I'll do this again if I get this sort of feedback. Because I find sometimes I think people feel I'm snubbing them if I don't reply to their comments on my videos, but it's just pragmatism. I don't always have the time to do it. So this might be a good format. But I do have a few other things to do tonight. So I'll give it another 5 minutes. Um, Anyone else who's tuned in, feel free to ask questions. Right now, Jaeger by and the Wisdom Within are being very proactive, so thank you guys for that. So where are you from, by the way? So the Wisdom Within, you're in South Africa. Jaeger by, where are you from? Leaving aside your intergalactic dimension. A good thing about this format is I also get to see what I look like in a live feed. The other videos, of course, I just upload. Go scroll up, see I haven't overlooked any questions. Jonathan Scottish, are you still watching or not? Anyway, I'm liking this format. Hopefully, it'll be like this. If I could get this sort of thing going again, I will. Not planned, very spontaneous. So in 21 minutes now, I'm not sure if the live stream has a limit on the time. I don't know. This is the first time I've done it, so I wish we could do a voiceover from the communication end. That would be interesting, but I'm not sure how to do that, technically speaking. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is sort of like I've seen that like it's like a two-way conversation, almost like an interview format. That would be interesting. I basically with this channel, I'd like to develop it as best as possible, but I'm working on a relatively basic computer. It's just a HP Stream laptop, quite basic. So I'm not sure if I have the technology to do that. That would certainly be interesting. But I think this format's all right, where people can ask questions, I respond. I mean, certainly the idea of a face-to-face kind of conversation, interview, debate. I like the idea of it. I just don't know how to go about it. So I'm going to round this up soon. I'll give it another 3 minutes. Any other questions, guys? Girls? Anyone want to ask anything? You can ask absolutely anything. I'm pretty open about my channel, about myself. Maybe you responded to a video and I didn't get back to your comment, so you can repeat that. Nathan, do I often cry? Well, that's an interesting one. I think for a long time there was sort of a stigma around men crying, but I've no problem admitting I'm a pretty sentimental guy. And actually, that's topical. Literally before this video, I was watching tribute videos to the September 11th victims on the different flights, and I must admit there was one that really choked me up, and I haven't seen it before actually. Little girl, she was the youngest victim of September 11th on, I think it was flight 175, Christine Hansen. She died alongside her parents, and their plane was hijacked and flew into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Um, she was going to Disneyland, and I think, put it this way, I think you'd have to be made of stone not to get emotional over, particularly the death of a child. I mean, this is the thing when we hear about these big disasters, not just 9/11, but any disaster, any tragedy, any atrocity. As a collective, it's sad, but when you start hearing the individual stories and it's humanized, that's particularly poignant. I remember the Mogadishu bombing 3 years ago, major terrorist attack in Mogadishu, Somalia. There was a young woman who was a student killed in that atrocity, and the BBC was featuring her. Um, so, do I get fear over losing parents? I do occasionally. If my parents, for example, are driving home, like they come to visit me from Scotland, I get a little bit like, oh, I hope they drive safely. I hope there's no accident. I try not to think about it, but I do. I'm quite an emotional person. I wouldn't say I'm thin-skinned. I wouldn't say I'm particularly sensitive, but I am very sentimental, and I don't mind admitting that. Uh, that's why I find that films that deal with real life tragedies, whether it be films about September 11th, whether it be Titanic, even Pompeii, which is a disaster, 2,000 years ago, anything that has a human story, like a real human story, is bound to affect me. And I do find that my parents, yeah, I do sometimes. Like I remember when they got a flight to the States, I was saying, look, when you get there, send me a message if you can. And not going over the top. It's definitely on my mind. Um, so you've written, I find I broke down 2 months ago after having a dream about my uncle and how frail he looked. I got extremely emotional over this. I constantly fear the death of others around me. This is quite a spiritual thing, I think. I think we need to accept that death is part of life. It happens to all of us. It's a very in-depth spiritual thing. Most of us hope that we, die in our sleep in old age, but sadly, some people do die young in tragic circumstances, and that's hard. It's very hard. Um, I think the way around it though would be to recognize it is not obviously people die before the time, but I mean I'll give an example, personal example here. My father is in his approaching his mid 60s. His health isn't great. He had surgery recently. He's overweight. I do worry about his health, but I also sort of accept that he's not going to be around forever. And I'm not saying accepting it makes it any easier when it happens, but that's different from a sudden sort of like a car crash or a terrorist attack or something like that. They're not very pleasant thoughts, but death is part of life, and I think that's a very spiritual thing, actually. Yeah, I like that. Same here. I find that is what gives us the essence of being a human being. Right. Jaeger is by. What do you think of the American healthcare where, well, healthcare isn't seen as a right? Well, I'm British, and I have to say I'm very grateful that we have the NHS, which is the National Health Service. It's not perfect. But where there are problems, it tends to be more in issues around how it's run rather than the principle. I think the principle is wonderful. And with all due respect to American viewers, America's not the leader in everything. I mean, American healthcare is a very high standard. But for me, the very idea that you have to pay for healthcare. I was watching a film the other night, actually, Lionheart with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and in that film, his brother is attacked at the start of the film, and then medical people come up to Van Damme and say, "Oh, your brother wasn't insured." Now, to a British mind, that's a very strange thing because we, it doesn't matter if you're a businessman or homeless or a millionaire or a cleaner. Everyone is entitled to healthcare, and the idea of money just doesn't come into it. Okay, we have to pay for drugs if they're prescribed, and we do have to pay for dental treatment. But personally, I'm very grateful to live in a country where um, healthcare is seen as a human right. The United States, I love America, but I do think it's something that they lag behind. Millions of Americans, do have financial worries over healthcare. I think that's morally wrong. And if I was an American, this is an area where I think the Democrats are right. But that's just my opinion. Um, I mean, I'm not going to say I understand everything about the American healthcare system. Every country has a different system, and it's complex over there. I'm not going to say it's like I understand everything about it. But let me just say, I do believe that healthcare is a human right. There's grey areas, like if people have an unhealthy lifestyle, should they contribute to the cost? Maybe there's an argument that they should. But I think fundamentally, if someone's in a car crash or someone's badly injured, the idea that money should be a factor to me is just wrong. It's a human right. Are you going to say, oh well, we'll treat this person, but that's send them the bill afterwards, and then what happens if they can't pay for it if they're not insured? To me, that's very troubling. So ostensibly, a lot of Americans hold back healthcare because of worries. But anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent with that. Yeah. Um, Okay, the wisdom within. Another interesting question. Do you have empathy for inanimate objects as well? As a child, I got extremely upset about cars getting smashed, people treating objects in a mean-spirited manner. I wouldn't say I get sentimental about it. Like, I certainly don't. I think personally, I can only be upset over sentient beings. that is human beings and animals. I do get upset over animal welfare issues when I was in the Far East. The way Chinese zoos treat animals is disgusting, and that did bother me a bit. I hate mindless cruelty, humans or animals. Objects, it's not so much that I have moral problems with it, it's more that I just don't like seeing it. For example, if you get burglars come into someone's house and they trash the place, my sympathy is more with the people that are affected because those things might sentimental, you know. So I don't like seeing mindless destruction. I don't like seeing mindless vandalism. You know, things like a shop window or a car or a pavement can't feel pain. However, the optics are all bad, you know. It's I don't like seeing mindless vandalism. We have, for example, some drunks in this country who might go on a rampage and just destroy things for the sake of it. It angers me, you know. Um, I'm quite a tidy person. I don't like mess. I don't like seeing food waste. I don't know if that would come under this category. I don't like seeing food waste. Okay, this is a good question. What's the scariest film you've viewed? There's been quite a few. Horror isn't really my go-to genre. However, by the way, before I answer that, just a quick extension to the last question. I don't like seeing damage. I don't think cars feel pain, but I still, the idea of mangled cars, even if people have been hurt or killed, it's still not a very nice sight. And arson's horrible, seeing a burnt out building or something like that. What's the scariest film you've viewed? Well, The Exorcist, when I first saw it, I was taken back. I had to turn off the TV. This was when it was re-released on VHS in the UK. It had been banned for many years. It did shock me. But of more recent films, there's been quite a few. The Orphan, I would recommend. It's from Leonardo DiCaprio's production studio, Appian Way Productions. It's basically, if you haven't seen the film, I won't give too much away, but it's about a couple who adopts a young Russian girl, but there's more to her than they think. It's a genuinely disturbing film. I will say this about the horror franchise. I think directors try too hard nowadays. I think the idea of suspense has been taken away and there's too much focus on special effects. I mean, I'll give an example. 1408 with John Cusack. That was a good movie. It was a good concept, a good story, and it's quite creepy, at least the first half. But then for me, they just overdone it on the special effects, and I'm thinking that's it's no longer scary. It's just like, oh, look what we could do with CGI. Very good, but yeah, I have to say, in a way, real life scares me a lot more. So the film United '93, for example, about and hope I don't sound like a broken record here, but about the September 11th hijacking, that's terrifying because you know what happened. In a way, that's far scarier than some guy in a screen mask coming into your house. Although, of course, we do have killers in society. I've seen a few scary films. I love the Final Destination series. They've been called a horror franchise. I would say they're not pure horror. I would say there's a sci-fi fantasy element, but if you're familiar with that series, I think it's great. Where are you from, Jaeger? Is by where are you writing from? Rolling the tape to the next question. Nathan, do you oftentimes miss your childhood, having a personal problem with continuously refreshing the page back to a time far, far away? My childhood, not so much. And it's not that I had a bad childhood. My childhood was okay. It was average. It wasn't either all happy or all sad. Or I don't particularly miss childhood. I do, however, miss some earlier periods of life. I mean, I'm still pretty young, but for example, I miss my last girlfriend. I miss the times with her. I mean, not so much now, but things like that. Definitely, I do miss the past. I think most people do. I think it would be very surprising if anyone honestly said there was nothing that they missed. I miss very much teaching in China. I miss my class because I mentioned I teach online. It's really not the same thing. It just doesn't give you the same satisfaction as teaching in class. So I do miss that a lot. But childhood, not really. Um, Norway. Um, okay, I had two good friends from Norway in my university, from Bergen actually. Um, Yeah, but I've never been to Norway. I'd love to go sometime. The beautiful fjords and so on. So maybe save up money, get to go there sometime. Okay, guys, give another 5 minutes because there are a few other things I want to do, but keep the questions rolling. I think I will say this: if you constantly want to refresh the page back to a time far, far away, it sounds like you may be going through kind of clinical depression. I've been through that, so I know sort of the symptoms. I think the key is to have something to look forward to. I think we cling to the past when we don't have something to look forward to. So the key is to try and have things to look forward to if you can. Maybe on the topic of dreams, I had a scary dream this morning actually, but I've forgotten the details now. I know it was something to do with a ship. Um, yeah, it was in somewhere in the east, somewhere in Asia. I was on a ship with my parents. There was in the middle of a typhoon, horrendous weather, and we had to transfer from one ship to another, and we got split up. So I guess that ties into the thing about fear of parents. Even though I'm a grown man, it scared me. Thank goodness it was a dream. Just the and I remember in the dream my phone was out of credit. Some of my things were all soaked through. It was a nightmare. It was very, very scary. So I'll let you think up some questions. I like this concept, so I'll certainly think about doing this one again. The only thing with this is other subscribers on this, they tune at the time, they can't respond. I get very vivid dreams. These dreams encompass my thoughts for weeks, months, and even years. Years, they must be very powerful. Your dreams almost tailor your personality. So, are these good dreams or bad dreams? Almost Sixth Sense like. I haven't seen that film. I actually have seen bits of it, but don't think I've seen the whole film. Occultic, very dark. Well, maybe I don't know the science of dreams, but I understand that the little fragments of things that we've experienced throughout the day kind of combining together. So it could be, for example, if you're getting dark dreams, maybe you've seen something depressing on the news, maybe you've heard about something, and then it's an amalgamation of different things, possibly. But that would be quite. I have heard of this phenomenon where people awaken at nights, or rather not awaken, but they're not fully asleep either, and they get like an entity, sort of a presence in the room, and they're frozen. It's a terrifying thing. I've experienced it once or twice where you're frozen. You're not fully asleep because you can make out shapes in your room, but it's almost like there's a presence there and you're totally powerless. Yeah, I don't need to read out the responses because other people could see it anyway. Sleep paralysis, yeah. But I've also heard of something else about entities. There's a program I follow on YouTube, a channel, Bedtime Stories. They cover a lot of stuff like this. I'd highly recommend those guys. They really put the research in, and it's some very interesting stuff. Okay, I'm going to go this up to 40 minutes. I don't know how much space this is taking up. I do like this concept and I'll definitely do it again. Okay, guys, if I have time for about one more question, probably one more question. So let me know if you can think of anything. We'll do this again. Maybe next time I'll get more viewers. Ideally, I wouldn't want too many because then I couldn't respond to all the questions at once. But right, Nathan, are there specific religion, spiritual practices you would not experiment with? Well, for me, religion wouldn't be so much an experimentation. That's a very deep spiritual thing. Um, that's an interesting one because something like this always runs the risk of offending people if I say like I wouldn't do that religion. I don't see myself converting to Islam anytime soon. Let's put it that way. If I'm being brutally honest. Um, Spiritual practices, I wouldn't use a Ouija board. I'm superstitious enough not to mess with something like that. Definitely. Um, I think that yeah, I'm not even sure superstition is the right word. It's yeah, so definitely I think with things like spirituality and faith, you need to be a little bit careful. I mean, I'm not so like for example, I could go to a cemetery at night time. It'd be a little bit creepy, but I don't think it would be. I wouldn't necessarily be superstitious of it. But something like a Ouija board, I think I don't know. You need to be a little bit careful, particularly places that have a history now. My own house, it's an old house, but as far as I know, there's no real history here. The house next door in 1917, there was a suicide there. A woman cut her throat. So if there is any sort of atmosphere, I am a believer that if somewhere has had a negative history, a murder or an atrocity, it could carry negative energy for sure. Um, I think that religion, the the extent to which believers can go, the fanaticism, we see this particularly in Islam, that scares me. Like the fact there are people out there willing to butcher other people for perceived offense to the religion. That mentality I find scary, particularly when it's in like a mob mentality. Like you literally get a mob of people trying to lynch someone over religion. That scares me. But to be honest, mob mentality scares me generally, whether it's religion, whether it's a nationalistic mob. I think it's one of the scariest things on this earth, mob mentality. Okay, I'll give one more minute because I'm enjoying this, I have to say. I like the concept. So any more questions? Why are goats associated with the occult? Kind of strange. I think that's something to do with the paganism. I mean, certainly in ancient Britain, there was a very strong paganistic history in this country. We tend to look at our history going back to the Romans 2,000 years ago, but British history is a lot older than that. I mean, it wasn't ignorant cavemen built Stonehenge 5,000 years ago. So, why are goats associated with the occult? I think because they're animals, because paganism ties in with a respect for nature. I think it's something to do with that. But how that I mean, I guess it gets into shamanism and druids and so on, but I'm no expert. But I guess that's why goats are associated with that. Incidentally, just a little personal anecdote. The film The Wicker Man, it's a classic British horror film. Uh, it's set in the Scottish Highlands, but it was actually filmed in Dumfries and Galloway. And the opening scene is my father's church. So that's just a little interesting anecdote. But certainly the whole goat's horns and all that sort of thing. I remember there's this video going around YouTube showing a Rothschild party from the 70s when, yeah, it was sort of meant to be like an occult party. It's like something from Eyes Wide Shut, the Tom Cruise film. Very creepy. All the invitations were written backwards. All the guests were super rich, prominent actors, socialites. Audrey Hepburn was there, others, and there was a lot of kind of devil horns and goats and all that sort of thing. It is quite creepy, but I guess the symbology is to do with paganism. Okay, guys, I could talk all day to be honest, but I better go because there's a few things I want to do. I've enjoyed this, and I appreciate all. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the questions. I'll try and do this again. Hopefully, there'll be some more feedback. Um, stay tuned. I don't know if I'll schedule these videos for a specific time. I'll maybe try and do that so that people can tune in. Anyway, thanks for watching.